Welcome, everyone. We are live. Thank you for joining us for our last panel discussion of the day, Demystifying Gen AI. What is it? How does it work? And how can you start using it right away? So these are our expert panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves to you guys. So why don't we go around? I'm just going to start in the order that you guys are on my screen. So tell us a little bit about your background, what led you to data, and what you do now. So we'll start with you, TJ.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. So my name is TJ. I am currently the director of analytics at a shoe company called ASICS. Their main headquarters is based in Japan, but we have a US headquarters here in Boston, Massachusetts, where I currently live today. I've been in retail or online retail for over 20 years. And I just started working in data when people in the office started talking about data, and I wanted to know what they were talking about. And I wanted to be part of that conversation, so I decided to go back to school and get my degree in data, and here I am, still living and working in data today.
Awesome. Thanks, TJ. Anthony?
Awesome. Yep. Yeah, Anthony DeCecco. I did a bachelor's in math education. I've always loved math, and I feel like that has been a backbone of my interest in data and using data to solve problems. So from my math education background, built on that with a master's in applied statistics. And so again, just more applied to business problems, and that's where in the industry I've kind of been in a couple different areas. Some overlapping with TJ in retail, but most currently at Chegg, looking at finance analytics with identifying fraud, as well as working on payment processing strategies.
Thanks, Anthony. Anshul?
Cool. My name is Anshul. I lead the data science for messaging as well as Instagram Direct from a safety perspective and integrity perspective. I've been at Meta for the last 7.5 years at this point in time, and I've been in data science for the last 10 years. I was a software engineer. While being a software engineer in itself, I pretty much loved my interaction with data. Therefore, pursued my career in data science itself, did a degree in data science, and since then have been in data science itself. Um, and I love the strategic part. I think the part that I really like about data science is that you don't have to always focus on data to make the best decisions in itself, whereas you have to think about like multiple different angles when you think about the final decision in itself. And I can speak to it more when we come through different questions in itself, but I'll pass on to the next person.
Thanks, Anshul. Okay. Jake, can you hear us?
Sorry. Yeah. Hey guys, this is Jay. I'm leading the data and analytics and data science team at Pella Corporation. Pella, probably most of you have some windows or doors that's made out of Pella, or that's where we come from. It's a 100-year-old company, but still on the leading edge of technology. So it's like a mature startup that we work with, as technology never fails to impress you, and there's a lot of things that's going on that's always happening that's interesting. Um, I have a bachelor's in computer science and with electronics and communication engineering. And I also did my MBA recently from UIUC, specializing in finance, marketing, and analytics. I think the journey with data has always been there throughout my career. And I think one thing that interests me a lot in being involved with data is no 2 days are the same. So yesterday is not the same as today. And that's what keeps the job exciting even after 20 years. I think that's the most fun part of it. You start loving your job, you see new insights, new problems to solve, new areas, new people. So working with different teams across the company, in any company, I've worked with multiple industries across multiple teams, and it's always interesting to learn something new. And that's what kept me working here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. And Jessica.
Hi, yeah. So, ooh, I'm echoing. Okay, there we go. So I studied cognitive science and got a minor in computer science at University of California, Berkeley, where I was really interested in all the relationships between the human brain and how we think and computers. And so a big portion of that is analytics and AI. But I also worked in a lab in college that was doing brain machine interfacing. So after college, I went into analytics. That made a lot of sense at the time. I kind of fell into it and have worked my way around pretty much any role within the data space. So I started out as an analytics engineer. I was a data analyst, and then I moved over to the engineering side, where I primarily support people who are doing analytics and doing all the cool math and all of that, and I'm making sure that they have a database that has all the data in it, that the data is secured appropriately, so that we don't have leakages, that type of thing. And yeah, like Jay, I think my favorite part of the job is just knowing that I'm learning new stuff all the time, and I have to kind of keep on my toes and stay up to date with what's going on. And then if you see this small cat right here, this is Lisi. She has to be involved in any activity that goes on with a camera. She likes to be the star of the show. So
Thanks, Jessica. Great intros, everybody. And I'll do a quick intro as well. So I'm Brian Mink. I'm co-founder and president of Data Science Connect. So I have had a bit of an interesting career path and to data and AI. So I actually was a practicing attorney for about 10 years, worked in law firms at several large companies. And through that, was dealing with a lot of contracts, found myself doing a lot of things that were repetitive that I thought could be automated. So learned everything I could about automation. Around that time, met my wife and co-founder, Amelia, who you guys met this morning. Many of our panelists know as well. Amelia was trained as a data scientist in the healthcare space. And so we kind of put our brains together, and I've kind of gone down the path of data and AI and have looked back, have learned everything I can about Gen AI, and now teach a course at Emory University Center for AI Learning on generative AI in the workplace. So my expertise is really how people can, especially subject matter experts who are not necessarily data experts, how you can make them data literate, and how you can leverage AI in the workplace in a variety of different ways to make our jobs easier and better. So we're going to jump to our first question. So we've been talking all day in the other sessions about ChatGPT and large language models and generative AI. But I think it's important for this panel to really make it clear for folks exactly what all that means, to sort of demystify it. So ChatGPT is built on something called a large language model, or an LLM. And that's an example of something called generative AI. So I want to break that down for our audience. Would one of you or several of you like to explain in simple terms what ChatGPT, generative AI, and LLMs are, how they are work together, how they are different concepts, in just sort of simple, basic terms, so that we can start this process of demystification?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. I think for me, it's taking a language or a group of words that we understand, and feeding it to a model to then output something that we understand, to make it very simple. And the more that we give the model, the better the output the model will provide for us. So it just depends on what we're asking and how we're asking it.
Yeah, great point. Jessica, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I was gonna lean on others to answer this, because I typically am the one trying to make sure that it fits our security protocols and all of that, and not necessarily implementing it. But I think the big thing for me is it's a lot of data that you're feeding into a massive network. and that is trying to make connections between all of that information to kind of approximate what we might refer to as understanding, right? It looks like it understands it. It'll output this large block of text that really looks like understanding. But under the hood, it's really a lot of statistics and as a lot of software engineers refer to AI as fancy statistics, if you will, because under the hood, everything is really just math. But I do want to point out like one really big differentiator between generative AI and kind of what we thought of as AI before this, which is prior to generative AI was really used for two big things. Making a decision and putting things into categories. And now the real big difference is, we're really breaking out of that output. So coming up with new novel things or mashing things together into new novel things is quite the change.
Absolutely.
Jessica, if I can just, I think you articulated that really well. Just taking that a little further there, right? You touched upon AI a little. I think if you look at it broadly, AI is made up of different pieces, right? Or silos. Or one of them is Gen AI and LLMs and other stuff. And then we have computer vision, which is another branch by itself. And then we have data science and the traditional data science and ML pieces that we work on. So those are three big pieces. And then one silo of that is a Gen AI and LLM piece, and through which we can start specializing, which is more human interfaceable, or which can do multiple tasks related to automation and stuff like that. So that's where probably they all fall into that family. Sorry, Anthony, I interrupted there.
Anthony, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Yeah, I think it's a great overview.
Super. Anshul or TJ, anything to add there?
I think like overall it's important for us to just understand the differences between when we say like generative AI, LLMs, or chat GPTs in general, like what are the differences? If you think it in a way, I think what you all said, like generative AI is like the broader category in itself. What Jessica was referring to was what was known in past called as discriminatory AI, which was helping us take decisions in either way, like primarily binary decisions are based on the existing data in itself, help understand the pattern and helps understand lead in a certain direction in itself. Whereas with generative AI, it helps you generate new uh, context, new text, new images, new music, for example, or new video in itself. Whereas LLMs are like one of the ways or one of the methodologies by which you can actually achieve generative AI. And there are like other techniques there as well, which is like GANs that we have. There are like autoregressive models. There are diffusion models in itself that we end up using. And then ChatGPT from there, like I know like we will be discussing about this, like ChatGPT is like one of the applications of LLMs for us to have like more human-like chatbot conversation.
Yeah, great point. And one thing to add there, I think a lot of folks wonder what's revolutionary about ChatGPT. Why is this such a big deal right now? And I think it's important to remember that generative AI and LLMs, while they are relatively new technologies, ChatGPT and OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, did not invent generative AI. They did not invent large language models. But the reason why GPT is revolutionary is because of just the sheer volume of data, primarily the sheer volume of data that it's trained on. And also there are some special things about the model that make it very good at recognizing and predicting what the next word in a sentence is likely to be. But I think fundamentally it's just that it is trained on basically the entire internet. And it takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of water, takes a lot of servers and processing power to train that amount of data. And so that just hasn't been done to this scale until very recently with OpenAI's GPT model and some other very large language models that are out there. So that's why we've had this kind of giant leap forward over the last couple of years, is because finally we have these models that are trained on so much data, and they are so good at recognizing what the next word in the sentence is likely to be, that they can do things that prior models were not able to do. So that leads us to the next question, which is, a lot of folks, when they type something in ChatGPT, they're immediately blown away. Like, wow, it can answer every question. It seems to have the right answers. It doesn't always have the right answer. Sometimes it hallucinates. And then the other thing is, sometimes it doesn't give you great work products. So especially if you try to create a social media post, for instance, they all kind of come out the same. They kind of look the same, and it gets very generic very quickly. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you know how to work with ChatGPT, you can do better than that. So this gets us to this concept of prompt engineering that folks might have heard about. So Jess, you want to start us out and talk about what is prompt engineering and how can folks use prompt engineering to get better outputs from ChatGPT and other large language models?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with prompt engineering is you're really just trying to figure out what works for a given model, right? So if you're trying to, like you said, generate output that you're going to put on a social media post, it's, trial and error and trying to figure out what the ideal prompt that you give is. And one of the big tricks with prompts is giving enough context, giving enough information about what you want that output to look like. And I think that this is one of the times where I'm actually okay with comparing computers to the brain. I'm a big critic of a lot of that, but I do think that that's a helpful analogy here. So in cognitive science and in psychology, we talk a lot about how your brain learns information and how you recall information. And one of the things that they consistently find is that multiple choice tests are usually the easiest. People do quite well on multiple choice because you're given all of this information that helps you search through your brain to find that right information. And when you start to do test questions that have less and less information, like one word answer or short form answer, or write an entire, write 3 paragraphs about this topic. That gets harder and harder and harder because you're given less information to search through your brain to find the right answer. And it's kind of the same thing with prompt engineering. If you give 25 words and all of those are good words that really help find that connection to the information you're looking for, you're going to have a lot better time than if you give a 1-word prompt or 2-word prompt that may not have the connections to the information you're looking for, or it has so many connections because you're using a really generic word.
Yeah, great points. Other thoughts about prompt engineering?
I think the biggest shift that we've seen with prompt engineering is that it's becoming more intuitive with context. So if you put in a prompt and then it's not exactly what you're looking for, you don't have to retype that prompt and add more context to it. Like you can just add, no, I meant like I changed to a dog, and then it will just change based off your previous text. And I think we're going to see more growth and development in that intelligence-wise to make it a lot easier for us to, make it simpler when we're trying to prompt a command like that.
I think I always think about this, like, given that we talk about ChatGPTs, that's that like human-like bots itself. It's very similar to speaking to another human. Like, you need to be clear, you need to provide context, you need to make sure that you are like having conversation in a very simple language. You're being like very clear wherever you have to be very specific. I think like as we continue to do more of that, it will be easy for ChatGPTs to do the exact pattern matching because they're pretty much trained on the existing data so that they can give you the new information that they can parse through from the existing data itself.
Jay or Anthony, you got the pulse there?
Yeah. Yeah, I love the comparisons that and examples that have been given before. I think one thing to highlight that you mentioned too, Brian, was around like always at the end of the day too, like understanding the capabilities and the limits of what you're asking for as well. Again, as has already been highlighted in kind of the intro around like, hey, we're training a bunch of data to give us a novel or an answer that looks like the data that's been trained on, but not always giving factual answers or exact sources that can be verified, and even looking for, again, just like what is the answer to a question when it's a very fixed answer, making sure that you're kind of asking of the LLM or the Gen AI, something that is what it was trained to do, for something new, instead of what is the answer to a very specific question might, again, hallucinate or go off track, or give you something wrong at the end of the day. But yeah, again, going back to the points that have already been mentioned around being simple with what you want, following back on, hey, this is not what I wanted something different, or changing the context. I think that's been a great way to continue to iterate, and for the AIs have been getting loads better in keeping the context of what you want, so that you can have it in a conversation way, building on all the responses or the output that has been given.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think one thing there, we mentioned hallucinations. So for those in the audience who aren't familiar with hallucinations with large language models, this is basically when the large language model like ChatGPT gets it wrong. It gives the wrong answer, but it gives a confident wrong answer. And so it can fool you very easily into thinking that it's the right answer, because it doesn't tell you that, well, I'm not sure about this. It really is just making a prediction about what it thinks the next word is. And so that results in an output. And like we've said, it's trained on the entire internet. So there's plenty of wrong things on the internet. So that's where it's pulling from. So there's a few ways you can deal with that when you're working with large language models. The way some data scientists deal with it is through a process called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, where basically you point it towards a data set and you say, I want you to only pull the answers to these questions from this data set. So like in the legal field where I come from, you could point it at some legal cases or some statutes, some laws, and say, I only want you to pull the legal information from this set of data and not from anywhere else. And that doesn't totally solve the problem always, but it does help. It makes it more accurate than it otherwise might have been. So that's one way of dealing with that. And you can do that in ChatGPT without any kind of data science background. You can effectively do the same thing if you provide it with, for instance, a set of documents and say, I only want you to pull the answers from this set of documents, or you train it on some type of data. Here's the data that I want you to use for your knowledge base. That's one way of dealing with some of those wrong answers, some of those hallucinations. So a lot of folks in our audience are interested in careers in data science, and AI. So to what extent can you use ChatGPT to help you learn data and data science, or coding languages like Python? And also, how much is ChatGPT going to make things like coding unnecessary? Lots of applications are starting to incorporate generative AI into low code, no code platforms, so that you can basically create a lot of code by just typing in what you want to do. So I guess if you can answer either one or both of those, to what extent does this make coding obsolete? And then also, if you're trying to learn how to code or learn Python, how can you use ChatGPT to help with that? Anybody want to weigh in first there?
I can take a shot at that. So right now, with all of the hype and everything, you have to talk AI within an organization. Otherwise, you feel that you're not part of the data team, right? But realistically thinking, AI is not necessarily the answer for everything, but it's also an answer for future survival of companies, right? So as a leadership team, and I work with my other peers within the data team and analytics team, we try to map out, hey, this is the data engineering team that I have today. and what is the skill sets that I need to look at, 5 years down the line, right? One thing is, how do I map my existing resources and the team members on the team to be what I want them to be 5 years down the line? It's uncertain, but there's, to some extent, you need to start planning around that. An obvious thing that came out of that conversation is it's very likely that the future coding language is English, right? And that means a lot of things. So it's a lot about, not necessarily learning how to code in a particular language, because LLMs are going to get advanced enough that you know any one thing, or you just speak out what you want and it will write the code for you, whichever language you want. So a lot more emphasis might also be in terms of understanding the basics of statistics itself and basics of problem solving, and understanding some of how the basic data science algorithms work, clustering, linear regression. Those are still going to be the core of what you really want students to evolve, because that's the long-term piece. That's not that those are fundamentals that's not going to change easily. And knowing that will help us to train and use AI and LLMs and everything else that's there in a much better fashion and a much more efficient way. That's my take on that.
I was just going to weigh in on that as far as like learning and schools go. So when I started kindergarten, no one had internet at home. By the time I graduated from high school, people were starting to get smartphones. Like, it was pretty popular. I think it was iPhone 3 or something at that time, right? And I remember very similar discussions to this around how do we deal with students using the internet? How do we deal with Wikipedia? How do you learn how to do things in the age of Wikipedia, right? And one of the concepts that I think has really stayed the same here is just the concept of verifying the information that you're getting, right? And so with Wikipedia, that really meant making sure that somebody wasn't just going and putting random stuff on there and writing lies, right? So there was some malicious intent, I guess. But with generative AI, it's just hallucination or unknowns, or grabbing information from that was just incorrect, and using that to serve results. So I think a really big concept here is just how you are verifying the information that you're getting from ChatGPT. Like, how are you using that? I would suggest that you always keep it in the back of your mind if you're using information that you're getting to learn how to do something. Just always keep that in the back of your mind, that there's a chance that this isn't true, right? Like, I might need to unlearn this at some point, because who knows, right? I could see this very helpful, though, if you're looking at code. So maybe you see a snippet of code and it's hairy and messy, and you want to understand it. I think that's a really good use for generative AI to try to summarize it, to try to understand what's going on. But I think it's always important to have use the information that you get in that output that it gives you to go and search for information. Oh, it has this phrase in it. Let's Google that phrase and see if I can learn more about it in blog posts or on Stack Overflow, etc. Stack Overflow, unlike generative AI, there's upvotes on there. You can tell if people agreed with that information. Yeah, just verify, I guess. Don't only use ChatGPT, use it with other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was just like, one callback and building off of what Jessica was saying is, and even what Brian mentioned in the previous one too, was like, hey, you might find a resource, have ChatGPT, feed that resource and condense it down, or give it a summary of what are the main points. And then, one of the other previous comments was around like, hey, have it write something for you, and then say, definitely possible that the code that it writes for you doesn't run and it comes up with errors. And then you can say, this had an error, this was the error, or, again, just like, keep on reprompting to try to fine tune what's the task that you're trying to do, or what's the error, or what's the problem.
Yeah, and I've never met a data scientist that didn't use Stack Overflow for their work. I mean, no one is like 100% writing straight code into Python without some help. So the use of ChatGPT for that work is more of helping you become more efficient in your work, but nothing is copy and paste. Like, you're going to have to know what it is. You're going to have to know how to change or what to change within that code to make it work for what you're trying to accomplish. The other piece too, which I want to address Brooke's question in the chat, because I think ChatGPT has been helpful for me and my team, because I also manage a team of data scientists, to use ChatGPT to figure out what are some certifications or programs or training modules or conferences that are out there that is applicable to you and what you're trying to accomplish. So, I mean, like, I could tell Brooke, one that I know of or that I'm familiar with, but it's probably not aligned to what your goal is or what you're trying to do. And what we were talking about with the whole prompt engineering piece, that's like where you can specify it to, okay, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. This is where I'm at in my Python career, my Python knowledge. What are some suggestions that is perfect for me? And I actually ask my team to do that for themselves. And I'll tell you, I'll get like so many different conferences or certifications or online classes that they take. I mean, it's all over the place. But it helps them with what they're trying to accomplish. So I would definitely say, Brooke, that is a great prompt for you to use in ChatGPT to try to see what kind of response you get for yourself.
I also wanted to add on to what you had said about TJ about not just copying and pasting. There's this like big joke on the internet for a while about somebody asked for help on using something on the terminal, whatever, in the command line, and people would respond like rm-f your home directory, basically like force delete your home directory, and the result of that would just completely brick your computer, and it'd be done, right? Presumably that exists in the context that is used for pretty much any of these models, because it was a pretty widespread joke on the internet, right? So I would just assume that there's probably going to be some of that. I would not copy and paste anything that you don't totally understand, unless it comes from a very trusted source.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really gets back to the importance of learning the fundamentals of what you're doing, as opposed to necessarily learning all the little tactical things. So as ChatGPT gets better at spitting out code that's, in some cases exactly what you need, the important part really becomes telling it what you need, and also being able to look at it and say, okay, this fits this situation, or it doesn't fit, or here's what needs to change, and being able to iterate and give it additional guidance to get exactly what you want the output to be. So it's really, it puts it back on, instead of just learning how to code and this does that, really learning the fundamentals of why does this work, how does it work, and how do I explain to ChatGPT what it is that I want it to do. So now we're going to take out our crystal balls and kind of look into the future. Many students in our audience will be starting their careers in 5, 10, 15 years, and it's going to look a lot different than things look today, and then our career paths have looked. So what are some of your bold predictions for the future of work with generative AI? And then what skills do you think it's important for today's students to start learning now so that they're ready for that future workforce?
I can start. I strongly believe that there is going to be a lot of personalized education going forward. I think some of those examples that we've already started seeing, there are already a lot of people using ChatGPTs or products like ChatGPTs as personal tutors in itself, where you can continue to give context about the past performance of an individual, and they can help you teach and help you coach a specific subject or range of subjects in the specific time frame. I think what ends up happening when we go to schools or like the current education system that we have, there are only limited type of examples or a very specific set of coaching that happens from one person to multiple students in itself. Whereas with personalized like LLM models, there's going to be more personalized education in itself. In terms of skills, I strongly believe, uh, I think you continue to make sure that you have ability to think critically. I strongly believe that as these LLMs continue to take more of the position in the industry to do routine tasks, to do coding, for example, to do repetitive tasks in itself. Emotional intelligence will become very strong asset of a human being, and that's something that we should continue to make sure that we are honing our skills upon. As this change is happening in itself, we need to make sure that we continue to raise our bar and our ability to adapt to new things in itself. So continue to have experiences where you are able to adapt and learn things. And the last but not least, I would say ethical reasoning. I think what all we have been discussing so far, like hallucination, verifying the information that's coming from ChatGPT on such models in itself, I think ethical reasoning will be very critical for us to make sure that anything that's coming out, it's ethical, and also we are able to evaluate things and have the overall society run from an ethics perspective and a point of view, because that's not something that we can lean on these models for.
So I actually, Anshul, I mean, yeah, that was a lot. You took all my bullet points, so that's great, covered a lot of really great things. And Brian, I don't want to take over as moderator, but I do want to ask Jessica a question if I can, because I wasn't, when you kind of gave your introduction, something I've been thinking about is this whole concept of when we were, as we're growing up as humans, right? So what the whole idea of brains and computers. As humans, we grow up with emotion, and we kind of figure ourselves out through emotion first, and then we develop a language. Whereas computers are developing a language without the emotional piece. So to me, like a lot of models today are very illogical. Like you give it input, it gives you a logical output, there's like maybe in the future it will start to develop more emotion with that response. So do you see anything like that today where computers are becoming more emotionally literate? I guess I don't know the actual term for it, but is that something that's a very real possibility for us?
I don't think so. I'm a big skeptic, but I think when we talk about things like emotion, that kind of implies this idea of consciousness, right? Like this idea of knowing who you are, and anything that we think of as being like a uniquely human feeling, right? The idea of feeling something, right? And one of the big concepts that we learned in studying cognitive science was just knowing that like nobody actually agrees on what consciousness is. Like there's not a definition that everybody agrees on. We don't really know what consciousness is. We know it when we feel it. But we kind of know that, like, we don't know what it is, but we kind of know computers don't have it. So that wouldn't be something that I would necessarily be worried about. um, I do think though, like, Anshul, you touched on this idea of thinking really critically. Like I think that like being really skeptical is something that really everybody is going to need to continue to do as an action, but also embody those feelings and be as a person, as be skeptical of things. The like we've historically kind of had this idea of like trust and how we trust things, right? Um, and it used to before Photoshop, it used to be if you had a photo of something, like, then it must be true, right? Because here's a photograph, it's photographic evidence, right? It's been a long time since we've thought that a photo was proof, right? And now we're seeing with video, right? You can fake video, you can fake audio in ways that you never could before, right? And so being a skeptic and always questioning the source of your information, and being on the lookout for things that seem too good to be true or too neat, too tidied up. Like, I think that that's a really big skill set that you're going to need. And since I'm already off mute, I'm also going to just touch on the other component of that, which is where we see, looking at my crystal ball. I mentioned I'm a skeptic. I'm maybe a hater in some ways, if you will, but I am typically not in with the hype of whatever is kind of going on right now. And historically throughout computers, all of tech, what we've seen is some new technology comes out, everybody gets super excited about it because we're all nerds in like the most positive way, and we're like, whoa, this is so cool, like, let's use it for everything. And then people create all these companies and they go to get funding and they use that cool phrase, and they get funding, right? And so we just keep seeing this all the time. We saw it with blockchain. I was also a hater for blockchain, and I feel a little bit redeemed now that it's not really as hyped up as it was. But I think what we'll see is it's not going to be as prominent as I think we all think it's going to be. We'll see it return to what it is kind of designed for and works well with. Instead of every single thing out there, we're going to see, oh, you know what? It works really well. It's like a learning companion tool. That's great. Oh, it works really great for accessibility. You can have something summarized at your level uniquely, instead of at a level for a PhD student, right? I think we're going to see that kind of, fizzle out. But it'll still be important, and it will erode away trust further.
So we are running or a little bit over on time, but that's okay. We're the last one of the day, so it's fine. But we'll wrap up with our lightning round. So it will go around in one line or a couple. What do you guys think will be the most impactful application of generative AI in the near future? So why don't we start with you, Jay?
I think Anshul touched upon it a little earlier. I think personalization, I think that's the key for AI. That's great because of the speed at which it can do things and put things together. I think it can do a lot of it, especially in the area of genetics and healthcare. I believe that's where personalized medicine would be the biggest outcome of what we can really do here. It's going to speed up the process of getting things done, and that way it doesn't take so much time for us to get a drug out into the markets. Probably that's where I would put my bets in.
Absolutely.
I think it's hard to predict the future, but for me, I think role playing is an important component of LLMs and like this overall technology of generative AI in itself. I think we as humans interact with other humans. And most of the times, I think these interactions in itself are very challenging. We do not know how the other person will respond to things or will react to things, or how should we be communicating to things. For example, I think for a lot of people in this world, it's very hard for them to speak to their manager to get a raise, for example, or to find a growth path to the next level in itself. I think building these models in a way where it could be personalized, it could have context about the conversation that's about to happen and how it will play out, will just like make our conversations better in the real world, and hopefully make like small things better, which will have like a broader impact in itself. Of course, like personalization around education and medicine and genetics, what Jay mentioned is like super critical. But like these small wins are very important for us to make like a big difference in itself.
Absolutely. Jessica?
If I can just add one other thing that I missed out. Recently, I was at an incubator in Chicago, and pretty much most of the startups there were all AI startups, right? And I think that's an area that's bound to grow, just like we saw the growth of all the apps once iPhone came in. I think that's what we're going to see, a huge number of opportunities come up, for coders and non-coders to be able to build and use the creativity and to the full advantage of what AI can provide them. I think that's another space for a lot of for everyone to start looking at in terms of the AI partnership. So looks good.
So I think like the most impactful, sorry, okay. I think the most impactful applications we'll see is really anything in accessibility. I think that generative AI just has it's really great at leveling the playing field, right? Um, and not just in the example of learning data science and learning how to code in Python, but also in that example of somebody needed to talk to their manager and maybe they have a lot of anxiety around doing that, being able to generate some sample dialogue and questions to ask and ways to phrase things. Like, I think that that's really powerful there as well.
Absolutely. Okay.
So to me, I think the biggest application, most impactful application is going to be in the gaming industry. So I love gaming, especially open world, just kind of fantasy living type gaming. So generative AI is definitely we haven't even hit like what it can do in that field, and I think that's going to explode. We've seen gaming grow year over year because of these new advances. So to me, that's like going to be the most exciting piece of it, especially NPC wise. Like, I mean, who knows what's going to be realistic in 5-10 years for that?
Absolutely. Anthony.
Awesome. Yeah, in terms of the list that's already been gone over, I definitely don't think I have anything new. I think in my mind it aligns more on the, level playing field and accessibility and just like just making so many more things across the board easier to connect and easier to get answers on. And if anything, like akin to looking through even the questions in the chat, right? Like the question around like getting AI internships or anything along those lines, I think it's there's almost too many like how-tos. So again, it's like they're all across the board, and I feel like there's also like too many how to do in very specific topics. So being able to just like replicate and learn from those and build personal projects and look for data that's online that you can build your own something on, I think is so much more accessible than it ever has been. So yeah, love it from that aspect.
Yeah, great points. And I would agree with Anthony and Jess, especially the points you guys raised about democratizing expertise in lots of different areas, making it easier. People can interact with ChatGPT in plain English and get it to spit out very complex answers. They may not always be the right answers, but often they're going to be better than the answers you would have found elsewhere. I mean, I think like in the legal space, I certainly would never encourage anybody to use ChatGPT instead of a lawyer. But for most legal issues that people face, they don't hire lawyers. When you're thinking about like, should I pay this traffic ticket that I have a dispute about? You may or may not hire a lawyer to fight that, but you want to at least figure out like what are the things I should be thinking about. And in the past, people may or may not have Googled that. They might have just asked a friend. And now at least you're tapping into basically the full knowledge of the internet. You're getting a good, concise answer. You're getting some bullet points to start your process of researching, of taking next steps. So it's not, ChatGPT is not the end answer, but it is, in many cases, it's going to be better than what people would have been using otherwise. So I think it definitely is an exciting space to be in right now and to see how things develop. Thank you all very much for joining us. Great insights from our panel today, and much appreciated for the active audience and the Q&A. So thanks everyone, and have a great day.